private voice message, allegedly from Sean Diddy Combs, just entered a federal courtroom, and what it reveals has everyone talking. In it, the music mogul doesn't just vent, he commands, he warns, and most chilling of all, he tells the woman at the center of this explosive trial to get on your job and stop playing games. This isn't some leaked drama between exes. This is evidence, introduced in a courtroom where Diddy stands accused of leading a years-long operation involving manipulation, pressure, and emotional control. The woman he's speaking to is known only as Jane, a former partner, now the key witness in a federal case. She claims she was pressured into situations that went far beyond a relationship. Situations she says she stayed in because walking away meant losing everything. Now, with alleged recordings surfacing and prosecutors connecting the dots, the trial is entering a new phase. One where Diddy's own words could become the biggest threat to his defense. Let's break down what the jury just heard, and why it could change everything. The courtroom was silent as prosecutors played what they claimed was a voice message from Diddy to Jane. The tone wasn't explosive, it was controlled, calm, but unsettling. In the recording, Diddy allegedly confronts Jane for giving him the silent treatment. He tells her, "I can do that too." He says it's not a threat, but the message carries weight. He talks about their relationship, downplays their arguments as spats, and insists that she needs to get on her job and stop playing games. To a casual listener, it might sound like a frustrated partner venting, but to the prosecutors, it's something else entirely. They say this message fits a larger pattern of manipulation, of control through subtle emotional pressure. The timing is critical too. This wasn't years ago. It was during a period when Jane says she was already trying to distance herself from Diddy and already feeling like her financial stability depended on keeping him happy. This isn't just a voice note. In court, it's evidence, and it's painting a picture that goes far beyond simple relationship drama. But that wasn't the only message Jane kept. To understand the weight of the voice messages played in court, you have to understand the relationship behind them. The one Jane says changed her life in ways she's still recovering from. Jane wasn't just a casual acquaintance or a brief fling. According to court testimony, she was in a long-term relationship with Diddy that began in 2021 and lasted until his arrest in late 2023. During that time, she says what started out as affection quickly shifted into something more unsettling, and something that blurred the lines between romance, control, and fear of losing the lifestyle she had become financially tied to. She described their relationship as glamorous on the surface. Lavish gifts, luxury housing, and travel, but behind closed doors, she says there were expectations. She described their relationship as glamorous on the surface. Lavish gifts, luxury housing, and travel, but behind closed doors, she says there were expectations. Expectations that made her feel like she had to comply or risk losing everything. According to her, these weren't just romantic boundaries being tested. They were demands tied directly to her well-being, her freedom, and her sense of stability. In court, Jane recounted how she slowly realized she was being pressured into situations that left her emotionally numb, events she didn't feel free to walk away from. She says Diddy didn't always yell or force anything outright. Instead, she describes a slow build of emotional pressure, subtle comments, changing tones, financial dependence, and an atmosphere where saying no felt like betrayal. And the messages now entered as evidence. They seem to support that feeling. When Diddy allegedly tells her to get on her job, he's not referring to a career or profession. Prosecutors say he's referring to her role in his world, her compliance, her willingness to keep up appearances, and most of all, her silence. She says she felt like she had to keep the peace, that if she pushed back, the emotional distance would come fast, followed by financial consequences. That's why, even when she tried to assert boundaries, she often found herself pulled back in. And this wasn't just emotional struggle behind closed doors. This was a relationship prosecutors now say formed the foundation of a much larger system. The jury isn't just hearing about a troubled couple, they're being asked to see this relationship as a case study in manipulation, one where voice messages like the ones heard in court are more than personal disputes. They're warnings, ultimatums, commands, and Jane says this wasn't even the worst of it. The first voice message might have raised eyebrows, but the second, it changed the tone of the room entirely. In this next recording, prosecutors allege that Diddy left Jane another message, this time from Miami, and the subject matter wasn't just silence or arguments, it was jealousy, possessiveness, control. In the clip, Diddy allegedly scolds Jane for asking questions about a woman he had been seen working out with. She had reportedly pressed him on who the woman was, what their connection was, and why he was spending time with her. His response wasn't apologetic. It wasn't calm either. According to courtroom reporting, it was sharp, dismissive, and laced with frustration. He allegedly told Jane that he can be with whoever he wants, that she had no right to question him, that if she was moving on, emotionally or otherwise, that was her choice, but he didn't want to hear about it. The tone was clear. He was the one in control, and if she didn't like it, too bad. To prosecutors, this message wasn't about jealousy. It was about power. It showcased what they say is a pattern of emotional control, the kind that makes someone feel like they're walking on eggshells, afraid to speak up, or even question behavior that hurts them. And more importantly, it showed what Jane says was always bubbling under the surface, that her voice in the relationship didn't matter. That if she spoke out, pushed back, or questioned his actions, the conversation shifted quickly into one where she was the problem. But what makes this message so significant is how it mirrors Jane's larger testimony. She says that in her time with Diddy, she often felt like she was living by unspoken rules. Rules about what she could say, when she could speak up, and who she was allowed to question. When she followed the rules, things were calm, but the moment she stepped outside of that box, even slightly, she says the emotional backlash came fast and hard. That's why this second message landed with impact. It wasn't about the topic, it was about the tone, the control, the reminder that he was in charge. And she needed to remember her place. In court, prosecutors framed it this way. These weren't just private voice memos. They were part of a digital trail, one that shows the dynamic at the heart of this case. Not one of mutual respect, but one of imbalance. A relationship where love, money, and silence were all part of the same equation. And Jane, she says this wasn't just personal pain, it was the price of staying in his world. But this world wasn't limited to words. There were actions too. And according to Jane, they started to get even darker. At first glance, the voice messages might seem like private disputes, arguments any couple could have. But prosecutors say they're far more than that. They're key puzzle pieces in a larger pattern of behavior, one that points to control, pressure, and what Jane describes as emotional captivity. According to her testimony, those voice messages didn't happen in isolation. They were part of a broader routine, one where expectations were unspoken but always understood. She alleges that when she didn't meet those expectations, the tone would shift, affection would vanish, financial support would suddenly feel conditional, and that emotional withdrawal, that was the real weapon. Jane says that much of their time together revolved around highly specific events, ones she didn't feel fully comfortable with. She described having to help plan elaborate nights where male guests were flown in, accommodated, and compensated. These weren't casual gatherings. They were, as she put it, coordinated productions, ones where she handled logistics, communication, and arrangements. But it didn't stop there. She says she voiced concerns about health protocols being ignored. In particular, she claims some of the guests involved in these gatherings refused to take basic precautions, and when she brought it up, she felt dismissed. The safety concerns, she says, were minimized or brushed aside in favor of keeping the night on schedule. It was in those moments, she told the court, that her role became crystal clear. She wasn't a partner, she was an organizer. A gatekeeper, someone responsible for executing a plan, even when that plan went against her comfort, her well-being, or her voice. And that's where the messages come in. When Diddy allegedly says she's playing games, Jane says it wasn't about emotional distance. It was about control, about her not cooperating, about her questioning the system she was being asked to maintain. Prosecutors argue that the voice messages support this idea, that the emotional tone Diddy used wasn't just frustration, but a reminder, a signal that her role was to keep things running smoothly, that if she disrupted the process, even by raising valid concerns, there would be consequences. And that kind of dynamic, they argue, is exactly what separates a toxic relationship from something far more serious. Because when someone feels obligated to stay in something they don't want, when the pressure comes not through force, but through emotional leverage, it stops being personal, it becomes calculated, and the evidence, prosecutors say, is piling up. As the testimony unfolded, the jury wasn't just hearing about emotional manipulation, they were being shown how that pressure allegedly played out in real time. According to Jane, it wasn't just about voice messages or uncomfortable conversations, it was about the environment she says she was pushed into, and the lengths she went to in order to endure it. She testified that many of the late night gatherings she was asked to coordinate weren't simple social events. They were long, intense, and often overwhelming, and to get through them, she said she had to rely on substances, not because she wanted to, but because it was the only way to stay detached from what was happening around her. In some instances, Jane claims those substances were given to her by Diddy himself. She said they weren't framed as pressure. They were offered casually, as if they were simply a part of the lifestyle. But over time, she says they became a requirement, a quiet expectation, something that helped her push aside her own discomfort just to keep the peace. The longer she stayed in the relationship, the more she says these nights became normalized. She stopped questioning them. She stopped reacting. It became part of her routine, something to schedule, arrange, and endure. And when she was too exhausted to carry on, she says the solution was simple. Another pill, another drink, another moment of escape. To the outside world, it may have looked like excess, but to Jane, it felt like survival. She described moments when she felt completely depleted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. But instead of rest or space, she says the answer was always the same: keep going. If you found this helpful or interesting, don't forget to subscribe for more. Or for a more assertive call to action, like what you see, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more deep dives.